2022 has been many things, but one thing I'll note it for being is the year of the Pinocchio, where we've had the ugly, the bad, and now thankfully, the good. Pinocchio, or better known as Del Toro's Pinocchio, is the latest take on the popular story which focuses around a wooden puppet coming to life. Yet offers a very different telling to the more classic fairy tale you're used to. The film was written, produced and directed by Guillermo del Toro, whom this is his first animated feature, but was also co-directed by Mark Gustafsson, who is all too familiar with the genre of stop motion. Which, by the way, with the runtime of just over 2 hours, makes this film the longest stop motion feature length to date. Funnily enough though, the film almost never came to be as the project was beginning to run over budget and was in desperate need of financial support. There were suggestions to have the film made in 2D in order to bring the cost down, but Del Toro was insistent on having it be stop motion. But with no studio willing to finance, the project looked like it was set to be cancelled. That is until Netflix acquired the film in 2018 and the project was back online. So yeah, I know Netflix has done many wrong things in the past, but credit where credit is due, without them, this film may never have existed. And I'm glad Del Toro was insistent on keeping the stop motion, as they did a fantastic job with it in this film. The models are highly detailed and have a wide range of motion, and with the dynamic shots of the camera movement and the choice of lighting, this really makes the stop motion feel alive and cinematic. I also recommend watching the behind the scenes video provided by Netflix, which though only a few minutes long, really does help you appreciate the sheer amount of effort that went into creating some of these shots. You also get to look at the grand set pieces, which offer so much attention to detail. The only time I'd say the animation gets a little weak is when we get the water scenes towards the end. CG is used to help create the splashing effects, and it doesn't always look so great. I really like the character designs of this film though, with each character having a different design choice to represent their personalities, from the wild cartoony design of Count Volpe to the more reserved and realistic design of the fascist government official. Oh, and yeah, there's fascism in this film by the way, but we'll get to that later on. Jiminy Cricket actually looks more like a cricket, though it should be noted that he's actually referred to as Sebastian J. Cricket in this film. Geppetto's model holds a lot of detail, such as the dirt underneath his fingernails and the tired bags we see under his eyes. The magical fairies, yes there are 2 of them, have a really abstract yet awesome look to them, particularly that of the Death Fairy, and the way they speak gives me strong vibes of the Satan character from Mark Twain's Adventure.
Life itself is only a vision, a dream.
Life can bring great suffering, and eternal life can bring eternal suffering.
I like how Pinocchio is designed very rough looking in this, with split wood and multiple nails sticking out of his back. This not only fits in the narrative sense as Geppetto created him when he was blackout drunk, but also represents Pinocchio's imperfections as a character. Along with the creative designs, you have a highly talented voice cast which help bring them to life. Gregory Mann does a decent job with Pinocchio, which when you have a child actor it can be very hit and miss, especially when voicing the main character of the film, which could make or break the entire immersion.
I will obey and go to school, and I will be the very best at whatever they do there.
You have David Bradley as Geppetto.
Pinocchio, if you go to sleep, I'll make you a new pair of legs in the morning.
Ewan McGregor as Sebastian.
Why are you so blind? So absolutely blind. The boy loves you.
Tom Kenny, the guy who voices SpongeBob, is voicing Mussolini in this.
I like puppets.
Oh, and you see this elegant lady, Katie Blanchett?
Discussions about humanity into a really entertaining family movie.
She voices this screeching monkey. What the fuck? Then we have the musical score, which though it didn't really pop out to me, is still not a bad score by any means, and fits right in with the film. And fun fact, the composer, Alexandre Desplat, made sure to only use wooden instruments to keep with the Pinocchio theme. There are also a few musical numbers scattered in this film, which offer a more mixed response. Some are integrated quite nicely, such as Pinocchio singing Ciao Papa over the film, which is also a really great song in itself.
Ciao to say farewell.
But then others just feel awkwardly inserted, such as Pinocchio singing about what everything is.
What do you call it? Call it?
It's a clock. Don't match it.
And Count Volpe singing about his circus act.
My show was a magnet for the crowd. No one could resist Volpe's crown.
They're not terrible songs, but just felt a bit unnecessary. Okay, now let's get into the story. I'll try and keep it as spoiler free as possible, and then have a dedicated spoiler section towards the end. Now this version of Pinocchio, it's pretty dark, as there's a lot of focus around grief and death itself. And I know the original book was pretty dark too, as Pinocchio actually ends up killing Jiminy in that story. But compared to the more kid-focused media we got on the character, this is definitely a much darker take. We get a lot more focus on Geppetto grieving the loss of his real son, which you remember how in the Disney remake they kinda hinted at this? With Geppetto sitting all mopey being like, "My son," but it never actually went anywhere? Well, here we get a full look on what their lives were like together, and even get to see at how his son dies. Geppetto doesn't cope well with his son's death and spirals into years of depression, and only ends up creating Pinocchio through a drunken rage, which gives Pinocchio's creation more of a Frankenstein kind of feel, rather than the wholesome toy crafting one. And this extends further with how the townspeople view Pinocchio as a monster, which, you know, I'm actually glad that they finally acknowledged the fact that a walking wooden puppet would indeed freak the average person out. We also see Geppetto struggling a lot more to accept Pinocchio, as he keeps comparing how flawed Pinocchio is in comparison to how perfect his son used to be.
Carlo never acted like this.
Which again, this is something the Disney remake hinted at, but never showed. Whereas here we see this causing conflict between Geppetto and Pinocchio. And I like this. It shows Geppetto as a flawed character too, as even he gets some lecturings from Sebastian. Which, now that I think about it, I think Sebastian actually ends up spending more screen time with Geppetto than he does Pinocchio. Sebastian isn't perfect himself, however, and only agrees to take on the role of Pinocchio's conscience on the condition that he'll get a wish for fame and fortune once the task is complete. Then as the film progresses, we start to lean more into the political focus of the story. And I know when we hear the term political in a film, it can make you wince a bit, but I think here it's actually integrated pretty well. See, rather than taking place in Italy during the 1800s, this film is set during the 1930s, where Italy was under the fascist ruling of Mussolini. And I'll admit, when I first saw a bunch of characters Zeke-heiling, it really caught me off guard. The fascist influence is felt throughout the film, and is the reason many of the townsfolk have a negative reception to Pinocchio, as he is seen to be different and therefore inferior. But it's not just his physical appearance, it's also his mentality, as Pinocchio's innocence and questioning of the rules soon starts to draw attention from one of the government officials.
Obviously, the puppet is quite a dissident, an independent thinker, I'd say.
But even with all the politics, it is clear what the main theme of this film is, and that's death. The concept of dying and losing loved ones is a prominent theme in this film. And I know that sounds really depressing, but it's honestly not as bad as you think, as it leans more from the angle of making the most out of life and celebrating it, rather than fearing the impending doom. On top of that, the film also has some pretty comedic moments scattered throughout, normally involving some pretty dark comedy, such as this seagull exploding, the way this captain just yeets off the ship, and there's this running gag of Sebastian getting crushed a lot of the time, which, quite honestly, felt kinda harsh in places.
Oh, the pain. Life is such hideous pain.
Now this is where I'm going to talk some spoilers, so if you haven't seen the film, I recommend checking it out. And if you don't want to hear the spoilers, you can click off the video now. First up, the whole section of having Pinocchio joining the military felt a little bit clunky. I think it was more there to provide an arc between Candlewick and his father, but story-wise it just felt unnecessary. Pinocchio is shot by Mussolini, and then wakes up in the army truck being told that he's now fighting for the Italian army. Which you'd think, just having been shot by Mussolini, this is something that he definitely wouldn't allow. But then after we're done with the whole training section, the base is bombed, Pinocchio is comically yeeted across the air, only to then be conveniently discovered again by Count Volpe. Like, you could just have it where Pinocchio is shot by Mussolini, and then have it cut to Pinocchio being waken up to a pissed off Count Volpe, and nothing really would change. I mean, we don't even get to see Candlewick for the rest of the film after this. I also want to talk about the ending, as I am also a little conflicted on this one. I really didn't like the fact that Pinocchio was so easily able to break the rules of death. Kinda made the whole waiting in limbo thing a little bit pointless. Then this got further watered down as Sebastian was able to simply bring Pinocchio back with the wish that had been granted. Boy, that was convenient. And initially this made me quite annoyed, as it was seemingly ignoring the issues of what happens when Pinocchio carries on living, when others around him will begin to die. But then to my surprise, the film goes on and actually shows us exactly that. And I was like, alright, fair play. And it really leaves you on a mixed note, with the gloom of death, but also some motivation to live your life to the best. It really gives you a lot to think about once those credits start rolling. There were also a couple of little narrative nitpicks I had. Like every other Pinocchio film, I still think Geppetto letting him wander off alone to school is pretty dumb. Especially in this version where he knows the whole town hates Pinocchio. And then they do the Disney remake silly, where they have Pinocchio's line being used as a good thing for the story, which creates a bit of a conflicting moral. Other than that though, I really enjoyed this film, both from an artistic and narrative sense, and I highly recommend you check it out. And until the next one guys, take care.
What happens, happens. And then we are gone.